Afternoon, everyone, welcome to another COPán Tay. This is our fourth and final installment in the series, and we have another powerhouse panel lined up for you this afternoon. I'll be introducing to you shortly. So this is part of our series of lunchtime chats taking place throughout the COP26 conference in Glasgow, and we are looking at how the climate crisis affects the arts in Ireland, and we're also sharing information on how we can all work together to support one another and see if we can combat the climate crisis so far. Now, you can catch up with these talks on our Facebook and on our YouTube, and we'll be popping this one up later. So they will stay online. You can catch up and you can also feed questions. You can join the conversation by popping your comments into the feed box or the comment box there, and we'll feed it back to the panel. Any links you want to share, any suggestions, any reading materials, we'll be welcoming that too. You can join the conversation as well on Twitter and Instagram by using the hashtag COPÁNTAY. So as I wait for my guests to join me, I'll just tell you a little bit about today's talk. This is about individuals versus organizations and where does the power lie. So more of a situation where we can actually look at how the individual operates within the organization, but also how the individuals operate as a leader of an organization and how we communicate that to our team. Hi, Diane, welcome.
Hi, how are you, Kate?
Thanks so much for joining us. And thank you so much, Catríona, for joining us.
Hi.
And Niamh. So today I'm joined by Diane O'Connor of the Sustainable School of Life, Catríona Fallon of the Green Arts Initiative, and Niamh NiChonchubhair Interim Director here at Access Ballymun. Hi guys, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for the invitation, Kate.
So I've just been yapping away to everybody there, telling them what they're to expect, and that they're to feed any of their comments, suggestions, feedback into the comment box. And then if you guys have any links or references or shares, please tell where to Google. We do have our brilliant back-end team, Claude and Afric, working away, who'll be sharing all the links and all the comments as well. I'm just going to ask you all to do a little bit of an intro and tell me about your role and your organization that you work with and just your personal role as well. So Diane, if you want to let us know a little bit more about you and the Sustainable School of Life.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm Diane O'Connor and I'm a theatre artist, so I freelance, and I also am a social entrepreneur born in the pandemic with the Sustainable Life School, which was set up with my my friend and then my colleague Natalie Pavone, and we set it up because we felt there was a lot of people at the start of their journey or wanting to start a sustainability journey and didn't really know where to start, and we felt the information was segregated, like, you know, there was food over here, there was fashion over there, and energy over down there. So we wanted to kind of create a central hub where people could come and learn about all those different areas in their life that they can be sustainable in. So we deliver a 4-week program, a four-part program, and we also have our Instagram and the Sustainable Life School, where we're trying to create an online community as well, just to kind of help educate and create awareness on this wonderful journey we're all on together.
That's fantastic, and it's so nice to hear that the pandemic enabled you to set that up as well, which I think has been an interesting turn for the climate crisis.
Definitely.
So we popped the link as well there in the comments, and I said that it was wrong straight away, the Sustainable School of Life.
I nearly said it wrong then myself. I was like, what did Kate say? Was that it?
Is that my company? Catríona, I'd love to bring you in and kind of give us a bit more insight to your role and to the Green Arts Initiative as well.
Sure. So the Green Arts Initiative was set up with Theatre Forum. I think we established it in 2018 after a couple of years of working on the whole theme of the arts and sustainability, but particularly around the whole topic of climate change. And we did a pilot project last year with 7 venues, and we're working on sort of the next layer of that project, which has been funded by the Arts Council under the Capacity Support Building Scheme, which is great. And so there are 7 art centres, theatres, venues, of which Access is one. So it's a kind of it's kind of working in a sort of intimate way with theatres and art centres to kind of get their feet on the ladder of what they need to do to address their environmental impacts. So it looks at energy, water, waste, and so on. But I suppose the focus is very much on empowering people, engaging people, and very much about building a whole staff team approach. And I spent some time with you guys down in Access, and it was great. Once you get to know people, working at the different levels, it really helps when you're trying to address the overall sustainability. So that's my key focus, the arts sector and sustainability.
Yeah, and it has been fantastic. We've had some online forums and we've had some extremely insightful conversations, and working with the other organizations to hear what they're doing. There's a lovely sharing of knowledge as well, just from the smallest things to the largest kind of budget impact kind of aspects to it too. So it has been extremely insightful for all of us.
Great. Yeah, and that's the key part of it, is sharing. Yeah,
yes,
basically.
And that's what today will be all about as well. We'll be diving into it. And last but not least, Niamh, if you can kind of give us a bit more information to your role at Access, but also maybe the Access Green Arts Department as well.
Absolutely. So I'm interim director at Access Ballymun currently since earlier this year, but I've been with the organisation for over 15 years. So it's quite interesting to look at Access through this lens. And luckily, we've been fortunate to have been engaged on certain projects and collaborations in recent years that have really informed our own work and our own thinking in relation to climate adaptation, which I'll admit to never having heard of a number of years ago, until Access was the Irish partner on a European project led by Creative Carbon in Scotland called Cultural Adaptations. And basically the understanding being that the climate has already changed. For some things it has happened, it is irreversible, and we now must adapt our systems, our practices, our thinking, our approach, our everything in order to slow this down and to address as much as possible within a very tight time frame once again, and that some things will just be forever changed. And how do we process that? How do we handle that? And at the moment I'm also in the place of how do we mourn that a little bit so that we can then renew our approach rather than just sitting back and feeling passive and helpless. So for Access, we're an arts centre. We're also a community resource organisation, and we also produce work and projects. So there's many points of I suppose there's many areas in which we need to address this, and we're doing better in some areas. Like we have a green arts department, we have an embedded artist, Maeve Stone, who leads us and those we collaborate with in terms of our creative practice, our projects, and gives one-to-one sessions to freelance artists looking to self-scan their practice to make it more climate, I suppose, adaptive. And then there's areas where, you know, we're just getting to the starting line and having to acknowledge that we have an awful lot of work to do. So it seems quite vast, and with the help of people like Catríona and others, you know, you do break it down into really feasible, actionable, practical steps.
Absolutely. And I also, just to give everybody an insight, like everybody on this panel are connected through the green arts in some way. Like Diane is part of our Access Assemble group, and you take part in our first green arts circle with Maeve Stone. So it has been lovely that there is all a connection, a natural connection here too. And it just shows you how, you know, wide reaching this topic is and how important it is to all of us, even though we all work in completely different areas of the industry. So it is quite a vast topic today. It is like an individual versus organization. Where does the power lie? This is not something that will ever probably be, it probably isn't an argument we should be having. We should just all be getting on with it together. But I would like to kind of start with the journey of the individual person. And Diane, I think we just lost Diane there quickly. But I would like to start with the individual and take us through how we as one person work from home. You're back. Perfect. Just in time. As an individual, like you're an artist, you're a comedian, you're a facilitator, and then you obviously have your own organization. How do you make sure all your green practices at home are then brought into all these workplaces? How do you make sure you practice that when you don't have the same ownership and accountability in these spaces as well? Like, have you felt successfully keeping your habits and your behaviors green as you go through your workspaces and your home space?
It's an excellent question, and I think firstly preparation is key. I'm kind of at the stage now where I've left the house without the things I need to keep my footprint as low as possible. So I know now when I leave the house, and if I'm going into someone else's space, to bring my food, to bring my keep cup, to even bring a container for the leftover food that I may have, so I don't have to just put it in the black bin. So I think the first thing for me to do is actually just to have myself prepared. And I think when you do that, then when you go into a space, that kind of opens the door to conversations with other people, because people often notice these strange, or they're less strange now, but people can notice your habits, and then that allows you to have conversation. But for me, the most important thing was something that I think I learned mostly in my personal life was about meeting people where they're at, and kind of not expecting everyone to be at the same place as you. And no, remember who you're angry at. Like, we're angry at the big corporations. You're not angry at your colleague who's standing in front of you with a disposable, whatever it is. So I think that's the most important thing when you're working within organizations, to listen to them, to be accessible. And because if somebody is at the very beginning of their journey, and you start talking about your composting worms at home, they're gone. You know what I mean? You've lost them. So I've made all those mistakes. So now for me, it's really about listening. So I would never advocate that recycling is our solution out of this problem that we're in. But if you're going into an organization that hasn't even managed to sort its waste management system, well, that's where you have to start, you know, and then you can build up, and then you can have the bigger conversations. And yes, we need to act quick, but we also need to be accessible, because it's more important to get people on the train and then drive as fast as we can, I guess.
That's true. And I love the idea that we shouldn't be eco-shaming, should we? Like, we should, and preparation is key. And that's drilled into us in so many aspects of our personal and professional lives anyway. And bringing, like, you know, I mean, I dropped my water bottle a month ago, and for ages I kept bringing the plastic bottles, and I hated it. I hated myself.
Yeah.
And I was like, just get, you know, and I had broken my bottle, and I was just going, the shame, everyone's judging me, everybody else has their water bottle.
Yeah. And then you were explaining to everybody, you were like, oh, this is not what it looks like.
I don't normally buy it. So I think you're right, and it's something that Niamh had said before, like, let's all meet where we're at. Let's all start at the starting line together, and move forward with the conversation there. And that's what kind of the ethos is at Access with most of the practices and projects that we do. So it makes sense that we kind of apply that this way. But that's a nice segue down into the idea of communication. My second question, which I'd like, Niamh, if you could cover this, would be how to communicate these ways of operating with your colleagues and team. How do we bring us all into this tribal mindset and we combat it together, as opposed to saying we do something and then our team and our colleagues aren't doing the same thing?
Well, I mean, I suppose I'm a brilliant person to answer this, because I've done it so wrong so frequently. You know, you get this nugget of information and it fills you up, and it's, you know, a light bulb moment, and you suddenly go, everybody, we need to do this now, or we need to stop doing that now. So I'm really guilty of that. And, you know, like Catríona has said, it is about bringing as many people on board in their different areas. One of the things I've learned, because, you know, I'm trying to do this at home and I'm trying to do it in work, is that it isn't a one size fits all approach. It definitely takes more time to do so in work, you know, and Access is a large organization with loads of different departments. So my understanding of what needs to change, or a system that needs to change, does not necessarily gel with the people working within that system. You know, a great case in point that Catríona had discussed with us previously would be, you know, that we should just, when we're back to live events and perhaps people bringing in drinks into the theatre, ban plastic cups. Brilliant, get rid of them, they're terrible. But you need to roll that back, and like Diane said, preparation be key. Well, how does that impact upon the bar staff who have to wash those glasses? Do we even own enough glasses? Are you allowed to have glasses in the theatre from a health and safety point of view? So for me, you know, barreling in and making decrees is never going to work. It is about checking in with people where they're at. It's also, for me, it's just such a brilliant thing to have more people gathered around this table, because if it is one voice the whole time, we tune it out. Like, we all do that. So having those voices and ideas, but also checking, well, does this work in reality? But then also there comes a point where maybe we're just making excuses for ourselves, or we think we're doing better than we are. And that's where kind of measuring and metrics, or, you know, looking in the recycling bin, and if it is full of curry chips, then it's not working, and that signage needs a review, and that communication needs a review, and it's not sexy, and it's very nitty gritty. And I have gotten curry sauce on my hands way too often trying to rinse like a can of Coke or whatever. But it does sometimes come down to that, and to, you know, literally like lather, rinse, repeat, like, you know, that communication, those actions. And if they're not working, you do need to be asking people what's not working, rather than, you know, eco-shaming them, as we've brought up.
And that's a really good point, Niamh, because we're now reopening. A lot of people involved in this talk and in the, maybe in the audience will be theatre and industry, event industry and entertainment. And they're all now reopening, and they're trying to be greener, and they're trying to be, you know, more supportive to combat the climate crisis. But the pandemic, for everything we've gone through, everything that's good for the pandemic seems to be bad for the environment. And, you know, we're going from this disposable and throwing away, like everything that's hygiene seems to be this one-off disposable piece. So we're almost not trying to physically pull people on one path. We're completely doing a U-turn now after the pandemic. And do you think that's going to be difficult with communicating with audiences, or?
I mean, I think we're still in a point where we need to start with ourselves. And it's brilliant, you know, the panel earlier in the week in relation to theatre and production, you know, again, I would have been like, well, just reuse everything. But where do you store the sets, and where do you store the props? And, you know, if you are donating your set to this Amdram company in Athlone, like, will they be outside the theatre at 10:30, ready to load the van up? And if you've stuck you know, a ton of nails into something, can that be really reused? So I think that we need to reality proof as much as possible, so that it does become something sustainable, rather than something we talk about. And in relation to the single-use stuff, yeah, I mean, I feel like COVID, you know, for whatever layers of necessity, undid an awful lot. But for me, it's about going, well, okay, if that cafe is still refusing keep cups, then just don't go there. Or, you know, if I really want that cup, I make sure I'm sitting down and giving myself the time to drink it out of a mug.
Like Diane said, being prepared.
And again, it's not sexy, it's not headline, but I've been so guilty of the big, you know, finish line statements, and not actually looking at what that means for my own behavior or for the systems anybody else is working in. That's where my greatest learning is at the moment. Yeah,
and that brings us quite nicely to your area of expertise, because for the last couple of years you have been gaining all the insight to these theatres and these venues and all their small nitty-gritty problems that you feel like, here we go again, we're reopening, how do we make sure we're reinforcing the message? So how are you working with these organizations to make sure they're not just saying on their websites that they're doing it, but we're all really trying hard to work towards a greener future and combat this climate crisis in the arts?
Well, I think the art sector in general, there's a kind of an authentic, real feeling to why a lot of people are involved in the arts, and that tends to translate into their approach to greening. So there's a real commitment. I don't think people are sort of just pretending. There may be a little bit of box ticking, but with all the venues that I've worked with, you can see there's a real passion to do something about reducing their overall environmental impacts, but particularly their energy usage. So, I mean, theatres have really the same problems that any other organisation, or indeed any other house has. And the big one is reducing your energy usage, and maybe moving that energy usage away from fossil fuels, maybe more towards electricity. You know, when it comes to, I know one of the things that you hope to talk about was the whole issue of greenwashing. And when we want to, you know, I suppose the biggest thing that we can do as individuals in terms of greenwashing is we can spend our money with organizations, or spend our money on products that we know are as environmentally sustainable as possible. I know a lot of people are looking at buying experiences rather than buying products, but obviously we hope to support there are genuine businesses, small businesses in Ireland who are selling things that are worth buying and things that are artisan made and so on. But when it comes to something like greenwashing, it's, you know, I wouldn't, if somebody is trying to convince you that you can buy something or do something that would have been very energy intensive in the past and that now it's zero carbon or carbon neutral, I would be very suspicious of that. So the next time somebody tells me that I could maybe fly a carbon neutral or take a carbon neutral flight to New York, I'm going to imagine that there's a bit of greenwashing going on there. So to give you an example, maybe with electricity is a good example. A lot of people will look for a green tariff with their electricity. So there are companies that, so the least green would be companies that are buying up green energy on the international electricity market. That's fine, but they're not generating their own electricity. Sometimes we get the feeling that they're out there with their wind turbines and their solar panels, but they're not. They're buying up that energy, which is generated by other people on the market. The next step would be, there are quite a lot of companies in the Irish market who are investing in wind energy and so on. But the greenest option, and I know this is something that I think we've discussed with Axis, would be, for example, something like Community Power, which is a community-owned electricity supplier, which is basically a not-for-profit that invests in community-owned power. So it just shows you the kind of three levels. You can spend your money on the big company that's all glossy and has lovely videos and so on, and it's telling you that it's buying, that all its electricity is green, which in a sense it is. It's been brought in over the interconnector, probably from Europe. It's not necessarily being generated in Ireland. To the Irish company that maybe is investing a lot in renewable energy, and then to this community owned. So it's really a kind of question of degree. And I would say that it's probably going to cost you a little bit more to buy, not maybe that much more, but there's probably going to be a little bit more cost involved in spending your money on something that's sustainable. And maybe it's that shift in, we'll buy a little bit less of something, but we know that it is in fact more sustainable. But I mean, it's a bit of a nightmare trying to wade your way through people's statements in terms of how energy neutral they are and carbon neutral they are. And there's the whole issue around offsetting as well, which is something that I'm personally not a big fan of. So if you have an organization, they're selling you something and you delve into why they're carbon neutral, and it turns out that they're offsetting, you know, which is a huge, very gray area in itself. It's so difficult to work out where you would invest money in carbon offsetting. Well, then I would be a little bit wary of that, because I think there is an element. I don't know, was it from COP? Somebody was talking this morning and saying that there was some big carbon offsetting project, I think in some rainforest, and they sold those carbon offsets to a big fashion company and a big another big energy company or something. So how green is that? It's not really very green. So we do need to be a little bit suspicious, I think, of where we spend our money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's actually quite useful, is for anybody watching, anybody who wants to, you know, invest in these companies, whether it's for, you know, travel or experience or what it is, like actually looking into their different green policies. It's something that we've really had to look at Axis and break it down, because I see some people just see the climate crisis as plastic. So they just reduce their plastic, and they're not thinking about energy, and then they're not thinking about carbon, and they're not thinking about water, and all these things are separate issues. And I think maybe sometimes because they're not separate and they're not understood, or, you know, they're not broken down for people. People
yes,
don't actually know what that companies.
The whole thing about waste, because of course waste tends to be the first issue that every organization and every individual, I was the same, it's the first thing you tend to tackle. But I suppose we have to remember that when it comes to your carbon footprint, waste is, relatively speaking, a small part of it, unless you're throwing away a lot of food. Food is the big no-no. Food is the thing that if you throw it away creates methane in landfill and has a big carbon footprint. But in general, your waste, which is lots of other negative environmental impacts, like we looked at it in the case of all the theatres that took part in the research, it accounts for about 5% of the carbon footprint of the theatres. So it's just, I suppose, just to bear that in mind. We can kind of go down a bit of a rabbit hole, I think, with waste, and so get so caught up in it. Whereas your direct energy usage, your travel, your heating, your electricity, those are your three direct impacts on your carbon footprint.
I mean, the great thing is, if you're talking about individual versus organizational, where does the power lie? We all can make an improvement. Okay, so I'd love for there to be, you know, a community you know, energy project in Ballymun, and maybe one day there will be, but there's no point in going, oh gosh, you know, literally a switch off campaign at home, at work You know, do I need the heating on, or should I just put on a jumper? And I know these are so basic, but I think sometimes we've forgotten to go back to basics as we talk about this more and more. Some of the smaller things and some of the more individual things get lost, you know, and I've been guilty of not powering off my computer and my monitor at the end of each day, and I didn't really know what vampire power is, but you know, I've left the chargers plugged into the wall. I also was startled, and I can't remember the stats, but you know, when you leave a Burko on, if you work in a company that has a Burko and you leave that on in the evenings or over the weekend, it's startling how much energy that uses up. And you could just switch it off and come in a half an hour earlier and it'll be good to go for the time you need it again. Like it doesn't, it's really easy to reach the starting line is what I have to keep on reminding myself. And even going back to basics, you know, should be glorified, because I definitely lost some of those, especially maybe during the pandemic.
I think so. And I think it's important as well to remember that actually we do know a lot of this, and all of this is common sense. Like, we're currently working on a project within the Access Green Arts called Community Vaults. And it's about sharing knowledge from older generations to younger generations about how we are more sustainable in our life practices. You know, these older generations would have been doing this by practice because of financial, economic issues, like growing their own herbs and vegetables, walking everywhere, you know, where this now can be very supportive when we're trying to live a sustainable life environmentally. And so they're trying to teach these younger generations, and it's a lovely project. And we do have a meeting on Friday if anybody wants to come along at 4:30 in Access Green Arts on rain gardens, and how we can look at like outdoor dripping and make them into these kind of more little ecological spaces. So we have an artist coming along, and we'll be doing that. That's just a little plug for one of our events. There'll be a few more before we end. I think that another good point that you've all brought up is actually, like I said, it is common sense, but maybe it's the terminology puts people off. And I wonder, like Diane, with the work that you do in the Sustainable Life School, is there anything about breaking down the terminology, getting a glossary together so people understand like vampire power and like offsetting and things like that?
Yeah, speaking of vampires, my mini vampires are home in case you hear any background noise. But yeah, I think it's a barrier, and I think the language is a barrier, and a lot of the reasons people aren't doing things are because there are barriers. And I think those barriers we have to find before we can find the compatible solutions for that person or for that organization. Like Niamh was saying, yes, we do want the best energy available to us, but this might not be it at the moment. But what can we do? We try to really kind of, I guess, use the everyday language that people are familiar with, but a glossary is an excellent idea, Kate.
Okay, on the to-do list.
On the to-do list,
put it down, we're doing it.
Yeah, but it's definitely a barrier, and I totally agree, and it's something that I think you need to be mindful of when you're talking to whoever you're talking about, that we're talking the same language, because otherwise you might just lose people, and that's a real shame.
Yeah. Now, I'm conscious that we have a few minutes left, and I do want to get a bit of advice from all of you. But before that, I'd like to just share a statement that I got off ClimateWorks website. And this is by two of their publishers, Lena Federico and Kate Power. So it's systems change and individual behavior change are not conflicting frameworks for how to mitigate climate change. They are two sides of the same coin. So that's basically bringing into the ethos that we all agree that it's the individuals coming together within the organization. So Catríona, I just kind of want to get more of an insight, because I found taking part in the Green Arts is all give us all accountability within our company, and not just being told from the top down, this is the new policy, this is the new change. How important is it to you with the Green Arts Initiative to make sure that you're giving that power to the individuals in the companies?
Well, that's really the number one for me, because if you don't do that, it doesn't work, basically. And, you know, I would have been guilty of that in the past, and I was certainly guilty of giving everybody the benefit of my advice and everything that I had done. And I have learned that people don't listen to that. In fact, it has the opposite effect. So Niamh is probably blue in the face listening to me, hearing me say, make sure you bring everybody. Now, anybody who can come, any volunteers, anybody front of house. So, and when I went down to Access and visited, I really made a point of trying to get to meet people, know them by name. And I mean, Diane is absolutely right. What you want to do is you want to listen to people. You want to hear where they're at. A lot of people have all kinds of experiences that they can bring to bear. You want to understand. Part of the kind of the individual in-person sessions we do with the groups is to ask people how they feel about climate change. You know, ask them, because I think that's important, you know, because there's a lot of anxiety and emotions, and sometimes we need to say that, you know, that but I suppose at the same time, I would like to try and bring a slightly measured, if such a thing is possible, approach, so that it does seem as if we're going to take a practical approach, we're going to do something about this. I actually don't talk about, you know, statistics and what's going to happen to us all. And, you know, I just don't touch on that at all. I don't think it's particularly meaningful or useful at this stage. So that is the key thing, that the more people, the more members of an organization at every level that come to the sessions, the better. And I'm really hoping then that those people will bring some of their experiences home. And at every one of those sessions, we've discovered something from somebody who's contributed. So, as you know, we do breakout sessions where people are asked, people maybe feel a little bit more comfortable not being in a bigger group, being in a slightly smaller group, you know, having their say. People are a little bit apprehensive. They never ask any questions, which is a bit alarming. I'm not quite sure how that is on the online sessions, whether people are intimidated, you know, and feel I can't ask. But in the smaller group sessions, so that group approach is absolutely key. And that group individual approach pushes up. You know, when you think about systems change, systems will only change if there is a sufficient body, a mass of individuals who want them to change. And maybe an example of that is when they tried to introduce the water charges some time ago. It was like the system said, this is what we're going to do. And the individuals all said, well, no, we're not going to do that. And the whole thing collapsed. Whereas actually the same change could have been applied if it was applied from the ground up, by consulting and talking to people and, you know, involving them, and maybe there would have been a different outcome. But that's a good example of how systems need individuals in order for them to change. And you could say the same about a political system, that without the support of individuals, people have to vote. I'm not saying they have to vote for the Green Party, but if they need to vote for candidates that prioritize climate change and the environment. Because if we don't do that, we won't get that change. Politicians need to believe that we hold that dear, that it matters to us. And if they don't think it matters to us, and they don't hear it, they're not going to prioritize it. Sorry.
Absolutely. No, they're dead right. And I really appreciate that. And one good point as well there was about monitoring these success of these on questions. And you know, if people do have questions, please send them into us. But I do feel we don't get a lot of it because people are either overwhelmed, they're very glued, they feel like they may ask the wrong thing because it's quite informative heavy, it's quite scientifically based. But we do then get a lot of feedback afterwards. So I try and measure things on the aftermath and the feedback and the follow-up. And that's why these series will stay live for another while so people can catch up and follow these. So I think maybe the questions aren't asked in them, but people are engaged as far as I'm concerned. Now, I am conscious we have a few minutes left, and I would like to get a bit of advice from all of you. So I'd like to, Niamh, maybe if you want to kick off and just give, as an individual and as an organization, what bit of advice could you to save energy without spending any money?
Oh, wow. Well, at home, so I, again, I can't believe how silly I am sometimes, but for ages I was quite resistant to use the eco cycle on my washing machine because it looked like it took 4 hours versus whatever. And I consistently avoided it, even though it quite clearly says on an appliance that is made by, you know, engineers and electricians and experts, eco cycle. So I had to just read up that the reason it takes longer is because it's not trying to heat water as fast and pump as much water through at such a rate. So just embracing the eco cycle, only running things when they're full, having several conversations with people who fill the kettle to the brim, boil it 4 times before they make that 1 cup of coffee, let the coffee go cold and repeat the cycle again. I am a mom of 2 small people, and I, for myself and for them, because we have older children in our friend and family network who are giving us hand-me-downs, really embracing hand-me-downs, really embracing charity shops and putting, you know, things through a hot wash so that they're good to go. There's a number of online pre-loved and secondhand groups on Facebook that I do my shopping from now. And I instated a buy nothing new except for, you know, vests or shoes for the kids ban a number of months ago. And I feel like I'll just keep going with it because I've now found ways to, I suppose, clothe us. For Christmas this year, we're, you know, all my family are doing no gifts, just experiences, trying to embrace that. Buy tickets to Access.
I know.
Trying to embrace that for you know, in my peer group and my friendship group as well. Just my relationship to stuff is slowly changing. And in relation to how we do that organizationally, for me, it is, I get overwhelmed when I think about the vastness. So it is, you know, tuning into the guidance of folks like Catríona, and really showing up for it and prioritizing it and making the time for it, even though there's so many other things that demand your time. You know, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And to recognize that it can and should start with me, and that if we all embrace that, we'll be better off than we were, and just keep on showing up at the starting line, rather than being paralyzed by either guilt or you know, this overwhelming sense of doom.
Yeah, keep trying. Thank you, Niamh. Diane, do you have some advice for us?
Yeah.
I hope everybody's writing this down, because I have not, so I'm gonna have to rewrite them, listen back and do a transcript. Share it with everybody.
Well, sorry, so Niamh had so many great ones there, but one thing that I've started to do recently is I do a bit of baking, and I've tried to keep it for the nights when I'm using the oven anyway for dinner. So, and I find that's one little thing that I've started to do at home, and it's no big impact on me. And to take one of the tips from Sustainable Life Skill that we do in our energy class, is just for the organizations and individuals as well, but to say goodbye to the standby mode. So really just turn off any appliances or gadgets or anything that you can turn off, turn them off, and that can actually save you money as well as energy. So it's a easy one to do. And also, we have a collaborator from Codema for our energy, and she recommends the energy home saving kits, and you can actually borrow them from your local library. Okay, that's more an individual thing, but yeah, so that's another good idea.
Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate it. And Catríona, any advice for the individual and for the organization?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we touched on at the energy session yesterday was, and this was news to me really, I discovered it, I kind of worked it out about a year ago, when you look at the energy use of an individual, say a homeowner, and if you break it down between electricity, heating and travel. So we use about 4,000 kilowatts a year in terms of electricity, that's the average usage. We use about 11,000 kilowatts for heating. And if you commute, if you use a car, say 12,000 miles, you use 18,000 kilowatts in driving. So there's no argument. The biggest thing you can do is to get out of your car. If you really want to reduce your emissions, that is absolutely the biggest thing. Now that's fine to say, but I do live in rural Ireland, and I really am making an effort. Actually, as it happens, I do have an electric car, but I don't think the future is electric cars. The future is me walking to the bus stop and getting the bus into Dingle or whatever. So that's the first thing I'd say for an individual is try and use public transport, walking, cycling, carpooling, anything you can. Even 1 day a week, remote working, whatever it might be, reduce your car usage. And in terms of businesses, I absolutely agree with Diane. You need to eliminate all the wastage of electricity and energy. So all the energy that you're paying for that you're not using. So that is every machine. So every time you leave your office, you turn off the light, you turn off your monitor, you turn off your computer at the end of the day, you turn off your screens, you turn off cookers and ovens that have the times listed, the hour listed, all those things. That's the first step, I would say, and that will save you money.
Thank you. And I do appreciate that, because I think the key is it's people trying to do it without having to retrofit and use big budgets for big organizations. And it does sound like from our conversation where the power lies is with us all. You know, it all comes back down to us. We all need to be, instead of pointing fingers, moving forward together. and sharing as much knowledge. And that's what all these panel talks have been about. If anybody is watching, they've missed the first 3, there's so much nuggets of information that I hopefully we'll be able to compile and put into some sort of like document for you all guys to read up on, share all the bits of information from Catríona, from Diane, from all our previous panelists and hosts. So thank you so much, all 3 of you. I really, really enjoyed this and I really appreciate your time. I know it's your lunch break, and thank you everybody who has joined the conversation today. You can catch up on our YouTube and on our Facebook. You can join the conversation with #COPánTae, which I thought was a very good title. I think Niamh came up with that one. It was a lovely one. Yeah. So we all brought our tea. And Catríona actually brought a green cup because she was on trend. She was on brand.
A green cup with green tea.
So I should have put that in the invitation. So yes, thank you so much to everybody for joining us today. You'll be catching up with anything with the Access Green Arts. You can find that on our website. You also have the Green Arts Initiative link in the comments there as well. And you also have for the Sustainable Life School as well inside of the comments. So follow everybody on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and catch up and join the conversation online. And thank you so much to everybody for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.